أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. O Lord, let not our hearts deviate now after you have guided us, and bestow your mercy upon us, for you are the bestower of bounties. Amen. وصلى اللهم على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Amen. So we're going to continue on today with the 19th flash on frugality and the 5th point. Okay, Bismillah. 5th point. Out of his perfect generosity, Almighty God makes a poor man understand the pleasure of his bounty, the same as a rich man, and a beggar the same as a king. Indeed, the pleasure a poor man obtains from a dry piece of black bread because of hunger and being frugal is greater than the pleasure a king or a rich man obtains from the choicest pastries consumed with the weariness and lack of appetite resulting from excess. So, out of his perfect generosity, Almighty God makes a poor man understand the pleasure of his bounty, the same as a rich man, and a beggar the same as a king. Indeed, the pleasure a poor man obtains from a dry piece of black bread because of hunger and being frugal is greater than the pleasure a king or a rich man obtains from the choicest pastries consumed with the weariness and lack of appetite resulting from excess. It is surprising, but some dissolute, extravagant people accuse the frugal and economical of being mean and stingy. God forbid. Frugality is dignity and generosity. Frugality is dignity and generosity. Stinginess and meanness are the inner face of the apparently noble qualities of the wasteful and extravagant. There is an event corroborating this which occurred in my room in Sparta the year this treatise was written. It was as follows. One of my students insisted on my accepting, contrary to my rule and lifelong principle, a present of nearly 2.5 okas. 1 oka equal 2.8 pounds. That's just the footnote. So a present of nearly 2.5 okas of honey. So 2.8 pounds of honey. Okay. However much I reiterated my rule, he was not to be persuaded. So I told the 3 brothers who were with me to take it, saying that by being economical, they would eat the honey for 30 to 40 days in the months of Shaban and Ramadan, and not lack something sweet to eat, and the one who brought it would earn the reward. I myself had a pound of honey as well. Although my 3 friends were moderate and appreciated frugality, because they offered the honey to each other and flattered each other's souls, and each preferred the others to himself, which in one respect is a good quality. Excuse me. They forgot about being economical. They finished the sorry. They finished the 2.5 pounds of honey in 3 nights. Laughing, I said, I would have given you the taste of that honey for 30 to 40 days, but you have reduced the 30 days to 3. I hope you enjoyed it. I consumed my 1 pound of honey frugally. For the whole of Shaban and Ramadan, both I ate it. And praise be to God, every evening while breaking the fast, I gave each of those brothers a spoonful. Footnote, that is a fairly large teaspoon. And it became the means of significant reward. Perhaps anyone who saw my doing this thought it was stinginess, and what my brothers did for 3 nights was generosity. But in point of fact, I perceived that concealed beneath the parent stinginess lay an elevated dignity, increase and plenty, and great reward. If they had not stopped, it would have led to something much worse than stinginess beneath the generosity. It would have led to something much worse than stinginess beneath the generosity and excess, like beggarliness and watching another's hand greedily and expectantly. That is the end of this 5th point. What a story indeed, yes. Wow. It's very relevant also with what we experience in our lives. I mean, I have a couple of reflections that are coming into me also, based out of what the author shared. But let's see if anyone else wants to share something here. No. Okay. Yeah, this the 2nd paragraph was interesting. How in the name of generosity, something may appear to be we're helping each other out, but you're not being watchful in terms of how should we say, planning things out, so that 2 brothers trying to help each other out, being generous. Sometimes how we go on even with our life existence, things we deal with, interactions we have, it can easily dissipate with the blink of an eye. Yeah, that was interesting. Okay. Does anyone want to say something, share something? If not, then we can. Yeah, it's interesting. The first paragraph, I'd be curious to know what everybody took away from it. It seems to be pretty self-explanatory, where you don't really have to have quantity of something to make you realize your neediness and the absoluteness of his source of existence, bringing things into existence. So even just one piece of bread, like the author is mentioning, is enough to fulfill the purpose of your existence, rather than having a whole pie of pizza. I'm sorry, that's the only thing I can think of because I'm getting very hungry today. But that's it on my end. I see H. Beza, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I just wanted to also share some thoughts that came to me as I was listening to you share your reflections and read. In regards to the first paragraph, I guess like one question in my mind is then, the author here makes a he says, you know, it is surprising, but some dissolute, extravagant people accuse the frugal and economical of being mean and stingy. Then what is, in a way, like, what is then truly the difference between one who is a stingy person and one who's a frugal person? Because on the outside, it may appear that they're doing the same thing, or they're eating the same amount or giving away the same amount. And maybe like one thing that comes to mind is, what about like maybe like, let's for example, a king who might like reluctantly give away like 100,000 pieces of gold versus a man who does, like a modest person who perhaps doesn't have much but gives, you know, away one piece of gold generously. Just making this distinction in my mind. And I guess when it says frugality is dignity and generosity, that's something that I'm still thinking about right now. But just, I guess, you know, within this, you know, distinction between one who is stingy and one who is frugal, and stingy being, you know, one who doesn't want to give away, or who wants to, who, you know, I guess takes ownership. I guess, you know, being stingy in the negative sense is then taking ownership over what you have, so that if you were to give it away, or if you were to, you know, eat perhaps more than your share, you think it belongs to you, or I think that it belongs to me. That's why I'm stingy in that sense. Whereas I guess, just to make the distinction, I'm just using these two words as placeholders. Being frugal then is one who recognizes uh, where these bounties or blessings are coming from, and hence uses that um, intrinsic or innate measuring stick, if you will, within oneself. Because with the first example of the poor man who understands his pleasure, or the pleasure of the bounty, better than a rich man just through a piece of bread, um, in being frugal. Whereas the king, or the rich man, you know, in enjoying a pastry might not enjoy it as much, because due to resulting from access or a lack of appetite. So yeah, I guess like it coming down to being aware of not necessarily how much I have or how much I'm giving, but in part related to how much I have or I'm giving, but rather how much I'm using, and the consciousness that comes with it. But just, yeah, I'm just filling time, hopefully giving other people time to think as well. Thank you.
Ishbeza, thank you for sharing this, because it opens up the discussion much with a clear flow. Difference between being stingy and frugality. So, you know, this is like the fifth point on frugality, and it seems that frugality also has layers and layers of meaning to it. But as long as everything is pointing to the source of my existence, where I'm able to fulfill the purpose of my existence with it. And so the difference between what I understood, at least, is because the author also mentioned economical, right? So the two friends, you know, whatever they're doing, indulging into being generous and so forth, they were not being economical. And so even being economical is also part of how the order in the universe is set up, and how the human being is also created in such a way. So, you know, generally speaking, we plan our life accordingly as well. We have like maybe like a weekly planner, monthly planner, even like list of things, grocery shopping. I'm just being very practical. And that's just like very superficial on a worldly scale. But also, let's look into our basic needs that are given to us: the need for food, hunger, and thirst. So I'm given hunger today, and so I have some food. Okay, I'm gonna eat, you know, as much as my stomach can handle. I'm not just going to overeat that, hey, you know, it's going to compensate for tomorrow's hunger. That's, you know, that's not, I won't be economical also within myself. So I mean, that's the way I'm taking of it as well, being, you know, very practical with how the human beings actually also functions. So, and not, I mean, not, and the difference between being stingy and frugality, it's also like, as long as you are, I don't know, frugality has to do with being balanced, not too much, not too less, not going into extravagant. And we know the opposite of being extravagant is stinginess. So maybe there's also this feeling with stinginess, this feeling of, oh man, I don't know if this is going to disappear tomorrow. Like, let me accumulate this well, because I don't know what tomorrow brings. And so with that mindset, if I'm just living my life with this fear of accumulating, with the fear that I don't know if tomorrow, I'll have this available, then with that awareness, then definitely that's pointing towards stinginess, rather than if I'm living with the awareness that, whatever is given to me, I'm in need right now, so I'm just going to utilize a portion size of it. And so that will be the frugal side of things. Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
To your point about the acknowledgement, I think from the first paragraph also, he says first of all, understand that the bounty that is coming is not the individuals, but it is given. So it says his bounty, and you mentioned that. So the frugality involves acknowledging that the bounty and even the needs that the human needs have are coming from the source, whoever is making them. And I think there's a tie in terms of first acknowledgement has to be there, and then the human need in terms of how that need ties with that bounty. So if even the person who is really hungry, doesn't matter what something edible he gets, he will be pleased because the need is talking there. And the author, I feel, in the first paragraph is making like a clear-cut distinction just to make it clear, like a kind of an extreme example, because even if the rich man is really hungry, I'm sure he will go and eat whatever is available because to satisfy that need. And you may have missed, maybe like in the previous point, fourth point, there was a discussion on essential, like the needs that the human being has. One is for sustenance, and the other is the metaphorical sustenance that are not essential, non-essential kind of needs. So if somebody who has too much of excess goes and loses himself just in that particular metaphorical and becomes addicted to it in terms of, oh, that tastes better, so I will only eat this kind of food. And that is where, in terms of this non-essential or excess, extravagant kind of fulfillment of that, the need that the human has, that can lead to like losing the recognition or acknowledgement of basically what your need is, your real need. What is that? What is it calling for? And how does it remind you of where the bounty is coming from? So all that can be missed because everything is in excess. So for example, in the verse that we were studying, eat, drink, but do not waste. So while you're eating, while you're drinking, so in that act of yours, in that engagement, in satisfying your needs, like looking for, satiating those needs, like do not waste them, but recognize what that need is, where is it coming from, and be content with what is given. Don't waste it, basically. I mean, that's how at least I'm trying to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense because, the author also in the first paragraph mentions about access, right? So when you have something in abundant amount, then you won't even realize your need for it. It's just taken for granted also. That would, most likely pop in this attitude of, I have it, and then I won't even feel my need. And I'm just like becoming automated basically by following whatever is it that I'm supposed to do in my day-to-day routine, as opposed to if I have something in moderate amount, then I know that this suffices for me for the moment, and God willing, the next moment, I should be taken care of as well. All right. Thank you.
The thing will be more valued, basically, right? If it's in less quantity, if you have a lot of something, let's say everything is abundant, then the thing loses its value in the eye, most likely, unless one is really aware and conscious in terms of, and then starts sharing. But usually what happens is we start taking things for granted with the abundance of everything, our existence, our being, and things that are there. It loses the value.
That's very true also, and it's very practical also with the way things are set up. So if you're like a table displayed with like all kinds of food, a lot of them, sometimes just looking at it, you would lose its appetite, and that it's been very personally experienced lately. As opposed to when you have just maybe one or two things and you're like, oh, I'm so starving, and then you dig in. Right? So that's it's interesting. SubhanAllah, the way the order is set up, it's it's not very superficial. It's very experiential. It's not that, oh, it's something I hear in fables or stories, but this is really personally very much experiential. Thank you for bringing that point. So I see Sohail Dar, your hand is up. Thank you for being patient. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to, similar to what Asim and Hadija Beza said, some additional comments. I think what's interesting is that he writes in the very first sentence, out of his perfect generosity, Almighty God makes a poor man understand the pleasure of his bounty, the same as a rich man, and a beggar the same as a king. What that says to me is that frugality or economy, what I mean by economy being economical, is not man's virtue, but it's a God-given virtue out of his perfect generosity. It seems sort of a contradiction, like frugality and generosity. But if you think about it, frugality and being economical is a God-given virtue, because in doing so, the poor man can understand the pleasure of his bounty the same as a rich man. In other words, his bounty before two individuals that apparently are in two different positions can experience the pleasure of his bounty in the same way, in their own sort of respective positions, which indicates, the perfect generosity of his bounty, or in other words, how the absolute perfection of his generosity and bounty. And not only sort of do you see that in man, because you can experience it personally. You can experience his generosity and through his bounty by being frugal, because it is a God-given virtue, but it's because that's the way in which how things are created, brought into existence. I mean, you don't see anything outside of man, like man's affairs and man's life, that everything is economical. If you think about it, everything is receives the pleasure of his bounty in the same way because of the economy in which things are brought into existence. There's a sort of perfect balance or harmony in the universe. And man, by simply being careful or cognizant of what he's been given, is sort of, as Asim says and Deja Beza says, recognizing who the source of that bounty is, like from whose infinite treasury does this come from? Just like, in a way, the universe itself is sort of recognizing his bounty through their own sort of respective existences. You know, they don't, in a way, don't use more than they've been given, or don't act beyond their bounds. And I think this is like a very important point, because, you know, as he says, as Satisha Beda says, you would think stinginess, being frugal, is being stingy. But, you know, it's because, you know, when one thinks about stinginess in an individual, like, I think somebody else is stingy. By being frugal, it's, as it was said, attributing the ownership to individual, and not recognizing that their bounty is not an infinite source of bounty at all. It's what they've been given. And by being frugal, they do recognize that they were given from an infinite source of bounty, from his perfect generosity. But when you sort of divorce yourself from that relationship, you cut off that connection, then in a way, in a sense, everything in the universe, including man, is in a sense being stingy, because everybody is acting on their own behalf. They're not giving you all what you want. No one. And that's the only sort of conclusion you can come to. You're only left with that. So to sort of avoid stinginess or meanness, or realize that, you know, in frugality, there is recognition and acknowledgement. You have to be aware of that connection. Otherwise, you know, all things are sort of, you know, selfish in this world, if you think about it, without that connection. And I think, to me, that's a sort of important point.
Thank you for your comment. So now I'm thinking, I'm the poor man, and let's say Asim is the rich man. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
So our position is the same as far as being given existence is concerned. So now the author is mentioning the pleasure, right? A poor man obtains from a dry piece of bread because of hunger, and being frugal is greater than the pleasure a king or a rich man obtains. Okay, because of hunger and being frugal. So I want to unpack some more of what does it mean what does it mean for me to be frugal? Because I'm poor and I have just one piece of bread, and obviously a hunger is given and I would appreciate it more. So this is my condition. That's how I'm made, as opposed to this friend Asim, who has lots of, you know, pastries and pizzas. He's maybe not even feeling hungry, but our position is the same in terms of we are experiencing the generosity of our Creator. So he's feeling it too. Thank God, you know, I'm given like 10 pies of pizzas and and I'm also experiencing generosity that, yeah, you know, thank God I'm given one piece of bread by my maker, but I'm hungry. So, you know, that's it. At the end of the day, I'm grateful. But what is the author adding on here in terms of what makes me frugal is what I'm trying to understand. Being a poor man with one piece of bread, which I'm grateful for. What is the author saying that I'm being frugal? And then, yeah, and so he's saying that because of hunger and being frugal, it is greater. So the bounty I'm receiving is greater than the one Asim is receiving. So I was just wondering about that one. So Hildar, go ahead, please.
No, I think his example perfectly points it out, in that it's because I think that materially having 2 pounds of honey is better than 1 pound, materially speaking. But as he's pointed out in other previous points, they're both in the end going to be gone anyway. So the pleasure is not, from having 2 versus 1 or 1 versus 2. It's how you sort of view your relationship with what you've been given. That's what matters. Hence, if your relationship is such that, oh, I've been given this and I'll just consume it as I so please, then your pleasure is transient. It's short-lived. Whereas on the other hand, if your perspective is that this has been given, that's frugality. And I should not waste it, or I should make the best use of it so that I can derive the most pleasure from it. Then the honey will last you, as he says, Shaban and Ramadan, so 30 to 40 days. So it's an interesting sort of paradox or contradiction, but it's the only way in which man can be appreciative or be cognizant and aware, because pleasure, which is some sort of like an immaterial sort of feeling, only comes about when, sort of contradictory, when you have apparently very little of something, or something in which like it's not given to you just like that, because you don't sort of recognize then. You just presume this is mine in a way, almost at some point, and that's really the importance of frugality and what it means to be frugal. I mean, frugal in the sense of frugal with respect to something material, so you can experience the pleasure of his like infinite generosity, infinite bounty. That's the sort of relationship being set up. Hence why a poor man can experience the same as a king, so long as their perspectives are the same.
All right, that makes the case clear. Thank you for sharing this. So it all depends on the perspective one is looking into. Doesn't matter whatever status level, or poor man, rich man, doesn't matter, but really how am I utilizing that experience to fulfill the purpose of my existence is what matters. Although I would feel that being poor would put me at an advantage, because then you really feel the need, and you really feel the need of being given a bounty. You're hungry. But I don't know, but again, I think it all depends on how one is viewing their existence. So I could be having something in abundance, but if I'm really economical about the way I utilize my interactions and transactions, then that also can provide me, my interaction with the universe can provide me the same sort of pleasure as someone that, as the author is describing, is as poor or rich. All right, thank you. So let's see who, H. Beza, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just on that last note that you just brought up, Faria, I was also thinking, like, I think it's also possible that a poor man can also be a stingy man. So as you said, I don't think it's necessarily about how much I have, even if I may not have as much as I wish, or I might have things in access. But because even if I don't have enough of things and I'm aware that I need something, I can still be stingy in my worldview and thinking that what I have belongs to me and I need to get it. And along those lines, I was thinking about how, like, this frugality versus stinginess lens just expands to the entirety of the way that I view the entire universe. So, if I view the frugal man as being stingy, or if I am stingy myself, then in a way, I view the rest of the universe as being stingy too. So then it kind of becomes like the big fish eats small fish sort of worldview, where like, only the survival of the fittest, and everything belongs to itself, and it kind of takes that perfect generosity out of the equation, where everything is no longer are things in balance, in the sense that everything is given its due, but rather everything is in constant fight or battle, or constantly working to try to fight for their survival against one another. And so then in that sense, then the generosity is taken out of the equation, and everything is stingy, everything is looking out for itself, and there is no sort of cooperation or harmony or real balance or order in that sense. And tying it back to the main point here, then even if I may be a rich man, and I may have what does it say, a piece of cake or something, whatever, some like a pastry or something, a dessert, not only would I like the physical enjoyment or pleasure that I get from that cake, not only is that momentary, so much so that you could even, I would even claim it's non-existent, because within that instant pleasure that I get from the piece of cake or whatever is then the pain of its separation, and the reality, or my quote unquote, lowercase r reality, that everything is kind of fighting against one another, everything is what's the opposite of cooperating, everything is just not cooperating with one another, and just just in this constant battle to kind of go to survive and go to the top. There's a word, sure, that might be it, I'm not aware of that word. Mariam, thank you for sharing. Life is conflict. Yes, I think that's a pretty succinct way of saying it. So it's really like it's not just man seeking pleasure, but also man not wanting to be eternally damned within his own worldview. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you for bringing this point up. It's interesting. You were mentioning about stinginess, and I was thinking about, stinginess itself. So it's something that lacks generosity. I mean, yeah, there's gotta be a fine line in between. And the author, I think, beautifully pointed out that it's really the opposite of being extravagant, is the stinginess side of things. And I'm just wondering about, how can we understand stinginess with something that where I will not be able to experience generosity, or I don't know. So just throwing this out there. Thank you. Okay, so I see Suhildar, go ahead, please.
Just one other thing to add, or two things. If you think about it, really, what is the fundamental difference between one thing versus two things? One jar of honey versus 2 jars of honey, but not the difference between the two, but the difference between the two with respect to his perfect generosity, his bounty. There's no difference, because they both he must be infinitely generous and have an infinite source of bounty. There's no fundamental difference. And which speaks to, is man really interested in 2 versus 1? Primarily because either one, they're both going to be gone at some point, whether today or tomorrow. Or is he interested in the pleasure of his bounty, which is sort of an eternal connection? And that's the lesson. So, I mean, he paints a stark contrast between a dry piece of black bread and the choicest pastries. In other words, it doesn't matter, really, when you think about it. And that's sort of really, when you think about what the purpose in his bounty really is, it's not the material thing in and of itself or the number, but what it refers to. What sort of experience or pleasure do you derive from it? From the thing itself, which is transient, or from the connection to him, which is permanent? And I think you see that play out in the universe, as Bijay Bezos was saying, in that I like when if you look at the sun, at least to me, doesn't say or doesn't proclaim like, I'm greater than the moon. It doesn't say that. They're both in a sense equivalent, just like a piece of black bread and pastries, essentially, because they say they're equivalent because, to me, they both declare that who they are, what they are, and what sort of existence they've been given is from his sort of generosity or his perfect bounty. Or if you want to make it more tangible, if you think about it, the difference between an ant and a lion, there's no essentially equivalent with respect to being given from his bounty. And I think that's the sort of thing we can take away from our experience of the universe. And by being frugal, you are simply just you're not being in contradiction with what the rest of the universe is telling you. Is that frugality is dignity and generosity. So whereas the opposite is extravagance, because you don't see such a thing in the universe.
All right, thank you for the comment. Ali Murmur, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Everything what we read, what I heard, what beautiful. Thank you very much. I am learning a lot from the new generations. They are very successful in taking notes. I try to take a note now. What is my conclusion from reading this text and also listening to you? I wrote one short sentence, just I would like to read it out. Pleasure is not in how much we obtain, but in how much we feel in need of it. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Brother Ali, for sharing this. Ladies and gentlemen, session is over. This is powerful, actually. Pleasure is in how much we feel the need of it, not in how much we obtain. There we go. On this note, is there anyone who wants to share something on their side? Anyone? Maybe Mariam Ostomer, Mariam Syed, and Rayan, anything to say? You guys can formulate your thoughts and then share out while we give the microphone to H. Beza. Go ahead, please.
As just, I guess, answering the question that came to me as I was listening to our potential, or Mariam's new potential note summary sharer. Anyways, so pleasure in being how much, not in how much we obtain, but how much we feel the need for it. I guess, like, in my mind, I was also thinking, in my feeling of a need for something, it's not that the stingy person doesn't feel the need. Perhaps you can say the stingy person feels more of a need than the frugal person, hence their stinginess in a way. So I just wanted to make that clarification, because regardless of whether I'm the rich man or I'm the king or I'm the poor person, I mean, I may not want to admit it to myself, but I know that I am needy because I'm constantly chasing after things. I'm trying to obtain things, whether this is happiness or progress or whatever it is that means happiness to me. So I, as a maybe like a sub note to our to this summary that our friend has shared, which I'm very appreciative of, and I agree. I would just say, in recognizing that, insofar as how much I feel a need for it, recognizing that I guess the need for it is also given, right? And this being kind of like, this is the fifth point after all, and this isn't necessarily a new point that I'm making here, but recognizing that not only that which is given, but that even that which I want, the want itself is also given too. Otherwise, two people can still both feel very needy, and the stingy person even more so. Hence why they, or hence why in a state of stinginess, I might try to grasp onto something and not let it go, even more so tightly to the thing itself, because I feel the insecurity of non-existence, because I feel that, should I let go of this thing, then it's just going to leave my grasp, whereas it's never really in my grasp. So that would be just an additional subnote, if you will.
Thank you, Ishbiza, for pointing this out. So really, alhamdulillah, the case is clearer for me now with stinginess being, where, like you said, that even a stingy attitude would also feel the need for pleasure. But the stingy attitude would be more geared towards, that's it, that things are satisfying me. So, right, that part. And as opposed to the extravagant person, or the one in excess, or who's the attitude of extravagance, where the person is just taking everything for granted. And so the need for pleasure is definitely there, but again, there's no acknowledgement of a generous one in that picture. So what's the middle ground in between? It's really frugality, which is encoded in human nature, where I know that I have this need of seeking pleasure, and I acknowledge and realize that pleasure is not only from the things itself, but also in how much of the things am I in need of. So I don't need like 5 or 10 experiences to conclude that the source of my existence must be an absolute compassionate one. I can just take maybe just even one grain of rice, and that should suffice me in terms of fulfilling the purpose of my existence. And the author does mention that a lot, like 1 grain of rice or something like that is enough to fulfill the purpose of my existence. So thank you, really appreciative of the comments thus far. Is there anyone else who would like to say something? Maybe a question? We would love to hear from, fresh blood. Mariam, Rayan, Mariam, O, feel free to chime in, or if there's something you want to share. Do you want to say something? Okay. Yeah, it's pretty much self-explanatory now, like with the little story that's being shared. We can all make it applicable to our experiences. Mariam and Rayan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to say that, like, you have to be appreciative of what you have. Like, it's not all about like if you're rich or you're poor. Like, going like to creation wise, like if you are like let's say a mouse compared to like a cat. So the mouse can get the same amount of food as a cat, like meaning wise that they're equal. It's not because like going back to the example of the king, if he gets a pastry and the poor person gets a piece of bread, like like just the same thing like that.
And for me also, I like to say that, like, there was this book that I was read from my teacher, and there's this person, he was giving his other friends like gifts, and they didn't like the gifts. And he said you should be thankful for at least what you get, because it's about the thought that matters.
Wow, mashallah. Thank you both for sharing this out. That's true. Thank you, Rayan. In terms of creation-wise, we are all equal in terms of our createdness, or how things are brought into existence. So really the existential side of things, in terms of my needs. So just like Rayan said about the cat and the mouse, they are both created things. So there's really no distinction between the two. So so me as the human being, because I'm a conscious human being, I need to be appreciative of just creation around me in general, rather it be a piece of bread or a pastry, right? It's created wise, everything is pointing to the same source of existence. And as far as Mariam's comment is concerned with, even though if you get one thing as opposed to, if you're expecting, if you're not grateful for just receiving one gift, then, that you just fail within your purpose of existence, because, just one thing or one gift is enough for me to connect to the source of my existence. So thank you both for sharing this. And Mariam Ostermer is saying I don't have too many notes, so feel like I shouldn't share them. Okay, yeah. So hold on to your notes, Mariam Ostermer. We're going to give the mic to Farah. Farah, go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for all the comments and the thoughts. A brief thought came to mind reading this and also hearing everybody in the conclusions, that it appears that the poor man, and this is something that I think was mentioned right in the beginning by various people, this idea of connecting one's existence to its source. So bringing, while I see like the practical wisdom in this point, I was trying to sort of dwell a little bit more about, okay, what does that say about the conscious side of things? And once this point was mentioned early in the conversation about the idea of frugality being connected to the real source of the thing that we have, and stinginess basically appropriating the thing to itself or appropriating your ownership. So sort of like an egotistical view of what you have. So from that point of view, it appears that in terms of, I guess, meaning-wise, the richer person is actually the beggar. So, something like, it becomes like a little bit of a play of words, but meaning-wise, the beggar is richer than the king, because having little, or perhaps also having seemingly little compared to the king, but appropriate for his need, if we just look at if the beggar just looks at himself, or we'll just look at ourselves, it's appropriate for our need, but comparatively lesser than the other person. So I think about it also in this context, sorry for the disjointedness, that right now we are all observing or going through this month of fasting. And it's interesting that by the end of the day, close to breaking our fasts, in that moment of presumably, feeling the hunger, feeling the physical hunger, the physical thirst, we realize, or we are closer to our need to satisfy that hunger and to satisfy that thirst. And so right at the end, towards the end of breaking our fast, I guess that becomes the sort of the climax or like the pinnacle of our day, where we are, I guess, the most satisfied in the fact that we feel the most in need, as in we feel the most close to the opportunity to use that need in order to connect it with the source of the need and the one who satisfies their need. So briefly, basically the main point being that the beggar, in his realization of his need, of his greater need for that piece of black bread, is actually has the bigger opportunity and I guess the bigger feeling and the realization or moment of realization to connect with his source of eternal satisfaction, as opposed to the rich man who is, I guess, blinded by the world of temporary or transient satisfaction, and hence never really uncovers the sort of the, I guess, the treasure of behind his appetite and behind his lust for things. So the more anyone can be in a position to recognize their need makes them richer.
Thank you, Farah, for pointing out this interesting point. Actually, it is, I think, the main point here, that the beggar is richer than the king. So at the end of the day, we are all really beggars, begging to a one that's sustaining us. So we are need. Everything creation is a need to be given existence. So just recognizing this need makes us richer as far as our existence is concerned. Thank you. Good point. Beza, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just getting a little excited and worked up. But just to share some things on my mind along the lines of what Farah just shared, you know, the more anyone can be in a position to recognize their needs makes them richer. And I completely agree with that comment. Just to circle back to the other comment and make a distinction for myself. I don't know why I'm feeling antsy about this. Like, so the beggar is richer than the king in terms of being aware of his need, but not necessarily in terms of you know, what he has clearly. Otherwise, the other summary that we had made before about like you know, the quantity of what I have not mattering. So it shouldn't essentially matter how much or how little that I have. I might, even if I am, you know, drowning in blessings and bounty, which is usually the case for me. So in a way, materially speaking, I see myself as the king here. I have, you know, access of many things. I'm not begging to others for things because I already have many things. But being in such a position, it doesn't, it shouldn't, in theory, really matter whether I have, you know, one apple or I have 1,000 apples, because the richness or the beggarly attitude comes from my awareness of where that need is coming from and where that bounty is coming from. So even if I have, you know, as much as a king may have, and I can still utilize that position, because even if I become if instead of being frugal, if I become the stingy rich man, then in my stinginess is also a sort of discomfort, lack of satisfaction with myself. And so that lack of satisfaction is the perfect opportunity to then, reevaluate my situation and see that this need that I have that makes me cling on to things so tightly is also coming from the one who's giving me whatever it is that I have, and not being, not the things not being, not belonging to me myself. So again, just to tie it all together, the beggar being richer than the man, or the king can also be richer than the beggar, not just in terms of material possessions, but if the king is then aware that the things that he has are being given to him and that his needs are being given to him, whereas the beggar may not be aware. I mean, just to make this contrast, and the beggar may not have anything at all or very little, but even with his apparent uh, littleness, he might be very stingy and thus not recognize that what he has is being given to him and his needs are being given to him as well. That's not to say I disagree with what's been said, but just to just feeling a little antsy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, HPISA, for sharing your comments. I think what you said has been summarized by Hamim on the chat box. So maybe we can ask Mariam Syed if you can read that comment, please. That's on the chat.
Okay. Quantity is not the point. How much I recognize my needs and point it to the source of my existence as the one that sustains me is the gist of the matter.
Thank you. Yeah, so pretty much that's it. And then we also have Mariam Ostermer's notes, but we're gonna hold on to it and see first if people have some more comments to say, if anything you wanna add. Okay. Well, yeah, at any time, just make sure to express yourself out, put it on the chat. And well, if nobody has anything to say, then I think it's time right now to listen in to Mariam Ostermer. If you are ready with whatever little pointers you have with your notes, that will be great. Thank you.
Just a second, I'm almost done with my last note. Okay. So, my notes for the 5th point were: the bigger the connection with your creator, the richer you are. Frugality has many layers. Frugality has to do with balance, not too much, not too less. The opposite of frugality is stinginess. When something is acting on its own behalf, it is being stingy. When someone gives someone something, even though they have so little, they are being frugal. When someone has so much but reluctantly gives needy people things, they are being stingy. In this example, the poor person is richer because he has connected with his creator, while the rich man has not. A stingy attitude. Wait. Okay, that's incorrect. Connect your existence with the source of it. The more objects you have, the more you are blinded by them. Stinginess leads to lack of satisfaction. This is because you do not understand who is giving you everything and how grateful you should be. Quantity is not the point. How much you recognize your needs and connect them with your Creator matters. And that was my last note for the 5th point.
Excellent. Thank you, Mariam, for sharing these precious gems with us. Yep, people are applauding as usual. Excellent. All right, so if anyone has anything to add on, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I propose we move on to the next point. I'll give it a couple of seconds until we do that. Okay. Okay, so if nobody has any more comments, let's move on to the 6th point. And yeah, let's do that. I don't know how big this one is. It's small as well. Okay, so maybe we can ask Rayan and Mariam. Are you available to read this? Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, please.
6th point.
Yes, and nice and slowly. Thank you. So I don't know if some people are, is my connection okay? Rayan and Mariam, you guys can start the 6th point whenever. I think right now that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, the 6th point. There is a great difference between frugality and stinginess. Just as humility is a praiseworthy quality, superficially resembling but different to the bad quality of servility, and dignity is a laudable virtue, superficially similar to but different from the bad quality of haughtiness. So too frugality, which was one of the prophet's elevated qualities, and indeed is one of the one of the things on which the divine wisdom and the order of the universe depends, bears no relation to stinginess, which is a mixture of baseness, avarice, miserliness, and greed. There is merely a superficial resemblance. The following is an event corroborating this fact. Abdullah ibn Umar, who was one of the famous companions of the Prophet, known as the 7 Abdullahs, was the greatest and most important of the Caliph Umar Farooq al-Azam's son, and one of the most distinguished and learned of the companions. One day, while shopping in the market, in order to be economical, and to preserve the confidence and integrity on which trade depends, he disputed hotly over something worth a few kurush. One of the companions saw him, and imagining the illustrious successor of the Prophet on earth, the Caliph Umar's son, wrangling over a few kurush to be an extraordinary stinginess, he followed him in order to understand his conduct. Next, he saw that Abdullah was entering his blessed house and had spotted a poor man at the door. He chatted with him for a bit, and the man left. Then he came out of the second door of the house and saw another poor man. He chatted with him for a while too, and the man left. The companion, who was watching from the distance, was curious. He went and asked the poor man, Abdullah paused a while with you. What did he do? Each of them replied, He gave me a gold piece. Glory be to God, exclaimed the companion, and thought to himself, how is it that he wrangles like that over a few kurush in the market? Then we was completely happy to give away 200 kurush in his house
without letting anyone know. He went to Abdullah ibn Umar and said, "O Imam, solve this difficulty for me. In the market you did that, while in your house you did this." Abdullah replied to him, saying, "What I did in the market was not stinginess, but arose from frugality. It was perfectly reasonable. And to preserve confidence and honesty, which are the basis and spirit of commerce, and what I did by my house arose from the heart's compassion and the spirit's perfection. Neither was the first stinginess nor the second I'm obdurateness." Alluding to this, Imam Abu Hanifa said, "There can be no excess in God, just as there is no good in excess." That is to say, just as in good works and benevolence, there can be excess or wastefulness on condition they are for the deserving. So there is no good at all in wastefulness and
Immoderateness. Thank you, Rayan and Mariam, for a beautiful reading. So let's see. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I would agree. How the first sentence is interesting. Exactly what we were discussing early on, the difference between frugality and stinginess. It's also interesting how sometimes things may appear to be a stingy attitude, but in fact, if we look deeper into it, it's not a stingy attitude. And how they say, don't judge a book by its cover. The same applies for all of our experiences here. And let's see, is anyone want to start us off by sharing their immediate takeaways or anything that stood out to them? But let me see. Mary Ostermer saying 1 kurush is worth a lot. I just looked it up. It's a Turkish currency that was in the Ottoman Empire. 1 kurush is worth 250 American dollars. Yes. Wow, interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing this fun historical fact. Okay, and we have somebody's hand was up, or was it me? I don't know. I just saw someone's hand up, but again. So does anyone want to start us off? It was H. Biza. Thank you, Mary Ostermer. H. Biza, you're on the spot now. We saw your hand up. Go ahead, please.
I'm being called out by Nursi and Mariam here. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, had I been a little bit patient, then in a way Nursi would have kind of answered the questions in this upcoming point. I raised my hand just to kind of give people time to think as well. But again, going back to this idea of frugality and stinginess, on the physical outer surface, one may be acting frugally, but it may appear as though they are acting in a stingy manner. So I think what the author is the point that he's really driving in in the 6th point is just, I guess, the consciousness or the worldview. Sorry, it's a little noisy here that the person carries with them. So I'm just gonna end now.
Oh, you're fine. There was no background noise, but thank you. If you want to go ahead, please proceed. All right, thank you. So go ahead, Swildor.
It's interesting here how he's pointing out the difference between frugality and stinginess, because again, that's something that can be easily, but is often confused. But the two can't be anything alike at all. And in the example he gives, by sort of bartering or haggling over the price of something, it's sort of acknowledging when one does that not because the individual says, necessarily, it's my money, but rather it's something I've been given, so I must be careful with it. And one can see that is the case because when it comes to giving away that money for sort of without a transaction, he's willing to part with it without question to somebody who is poor, because he sees it as not belonging to him, whatever he is given. And that's sort of his recognition of it by being frugal when he pays for something, because it's not something for him to do as he pleases or for him to not pay attention. In a way, it's saying that he's paying attention to whatever he's been given rather than being sort of careless and forgetful. And when he gives it away, it's further acknowledgement that it also doesn't belong to him. And he, in a sense, is grateful to what he's been given, to the point that he gives it to someone else, because he sees he's been given. And that is sort of the result of frugality. Because if you took stinginess, somebody who's stingy may say, I may not want to pay the full price, but on the other hand, may not give to one who is in need. So Abdullah ibn Umar is recognizing his sort of neediness and the fact that his need has been fulfilled, and is very careful with what he's been given because he's been answered. His need has been answered. And in doing so, he recognizes the neediness in others and gives it to them freely, just as he was given freely as well. So to me, that's an interesting example of how he's pointing out the distinction between frugality and stinginess.
Okay. I'm not quite sure if I followed your comment correctly. You said that his need has been answered by bargaining in the market. Like, what do you mean? I do understand. Okay, sometimes you have to balance things out. Yeah. Okay. So maybe that can be like an act of stinginess, trying to lower the price of something, and at the end of the day, say, oh, you know what? I'm gonna balance things out by helping out the needy. Is that the point here? Balancing.
His need in terms of what he's in need of has been answered by having been given some sort of money, and he recognizes that his need has been answered and he's given something, hence why he's careful in the market about what he's paying for something. And when he encounters somebody who's poor, he too recognizes the neediness of that individual and gives to that individual without question, because he sees himself as being given as well, and that whatever wealth he's been given doesn't belong to him. That's why he's willing, on one hand, he's going to haggle over the price of something, but on the other hand, will give money away. Because the key component here is that none of it is his to begin with. And frugality in the marketplace, with that sort of recognition, leads to sort of generosity to those who don't have what he has. That's why frugality and stinginess are not equivalent.
Wow, mashallah, thank you for sharing this. This really brings up a new point, for me at least, in how I see things, because even when one is spending anything, like in this case, he recognizes that the wealth even doesn't belong to him. So he's really being careful in terms of how he's spending it out. So that's being frugal within his own existence. And this is great, actually. And at the same time, I was thinking also about, how we are taught to be an educated consumer, and especially if you go in the tourism world or the tourism sector, right? They can kind of teach you all of that, how to bargain and so on and so forth. But now I'm thinking, wow, that's just being educated just within the realms of this universe, where you're trying to save a few bucks to get some products. But this is a more conscious, I guess, aware attitude, where one is really recognizing the true bestower of anything. So even like the little interactions that go on, like really who is the source of existence of this, who's the real provider of it. I'm just, I'm given a trust, and I better spend it in a frugal way. Thank you for bringing this point up. It was refreshing, alhamdulillah. Does anyone else want to share any excitement on this end? Because, bargaining won't be the same thing anymore. Go ahead, Suhildar.
I would just say one more thing, in that in being frugal, so long as one is frugality in the sense of you're frugal with the awareness you are being given, in and of itself is generosity. Because if you think about the opposite, if he didn't debate the price, not only would he have parted with more money that was given, wealth that was bestowed, but when those two poor individuals came to him, they wouldn't have been given either. So in other words, if he had been careless, that would have led to stinginess as a result, because he parted with more money and then had potentially nothing or less to give those individuals, because in that mindset, his carelessness meant that he was okay with parting it with money so long as it potentially benefited him, but may not have benefited others.
Wow, that's interesting. Really being your own wealth manager, I would say, rather than having others manage your money. You should be able to be more cognizant of your transactions. Wow, thank you. Let's see, we have Farah, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Generally, agreeing with the points made here about this section, about the story. And I was thinking about a perspective, and if this makes sense, keeping in context the quote by on the next page by Imam Abu Hanifa. It appears that, so if you look at this story, it appears that this individual described here seems to be one that, attaches his existence in a thoughtful, meaningful manner with the real source of existence. So coming from the, the references given over here, his lineage and his background, about Abdullah ibn Umar. And so it appears that this individual is acting in as best as he can or could in the name of the one who gave him existence. And so his act that would otherwise resemble stinginess, because of this attachment to, his sincere attachment to his source of existence, this apparent act that would resemble stinginess becomes frugality. And his act that would also resemble excessiveness becomes good. And so I think it is that realization or that attachment that makes the act appear a certain way to, to us and to the person who narrates the story. And in thinking about this individual attaching himself to the source of his existence, one way that perhaps I was thinking could be looked at this story is that when he, let's say, is negotiating with the trade scenario, trying to make sure that he gets the right price and it's fair. I guess he acts in realization of his need for justice, for fairness, for things being in measure and things being in precise. And so this need all reflects, I guess, qualities of his source of existence also. So in a way, this act attaches himself with those qualities or helps him recognize those qualities. And then when he does act in generosity towards the individuals who are in need, the poor individuals, then again, he recognizes his need to help the ones in need, and his sort of understanding of him being a intermediary, as it was described in the previous comment, that none of his wealth belongs to him, and that he becomes an intermediary to realize this quality of his source of existence, the quality of being generous because his source or his creator is generous. And so he, by acting in his name, realizes or recognizes this quality, giving him again the opportunity to attach this liking or this need for generosity or this liking for generosity with his source of existence. So in effect, this quote that is given at the end is a good one in trying to apply this to the story, that there can be no excess in good. And over here, if I just substitute the word good with this concept that we talk about here a lot, about attaching oneself to the source of his existence. So there can be no excess in attaching oneself to his source of existence. And there's no, I guess, attachment in excess, which is just doing things for the sake of doing it without any attachment to its source.
Farah, thank you for sharing your comments. Interesting. I was thinking about, when you do bargain for something and you did save a couple of bucks, let's say, there's this feeling of excitement that is imparted. So now it's just a matter of connecting that feeling to really, first of all, acknowledging that I'm made in a way of being frugal, and then the rest we can all internalize it for ourselves. That was a very refreshing discussion. Thank you all for sharing your comments. I know Mariam Ostermeyer, you do not have any pointers to share. Let us know if there's something. Otherwise, you can put a little yes or no on the chat so we know. No. All right, good. It's 5:35, so I think this is it for now. I'll just give in 5 seconds just to see if there's any last minute thoughts lingering in anyone's mind or any excitement. All right, so thank you all for your participation and contribution. Inshallah, next week we will pick up from the 7th point and check to see what the author means by excess and wastefulness lead to greed. So greed has 3 consequences. That should be coming up next Sunday, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Glory be unto you. We have no knowledge save except that which you've taught us. Indeed, you are all knowledgeable, all wise. Wa akhiru da'wahum alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Bi hurmati sirra surat al-Fatiha. Ameen.